Hello, Steve White, Tripway89 for Steve Arts89. I tried to do a review of season 2 of Star Trek Picard, um, but I got really caught up in all the discovery issues and philosophical issues with what they're doing with the series. I didn't really get much time to actually talk about the episode itself. Um, I'll probably do more in detail reviews of the individual episodes later on when we know more about the overall story. But I just want to talk more about this episode. Now, we start off like I went through with the scene at Utopia Planitia. And the good thing about it is they use an actual phaser at some point. You actually see the orange beam of the phaser. It's not a laser rifle or something like we've seen in the recent Star Treks, which are basically just like what they use in Star Wars and every other science fiction show. The phasers were specific to Star Trek, and it's one of the things that you recognised about Star Trek were the phasers, like the transporters and stuff like that. So it was good to see that. But the idea of a lower working class in the Next Generation universe doesn't really work, and the idea that the androids are being used as slave labor and no one was had a problem with this after the events of The Measure of a Man and the other things in Voyager. Someone pointed out about the MHs and stuff. There's always going to be people trying to do bad things. I guess there's always going to be the odd individual, but the overall Starfleet and their philosophy protects from things like this happening, so it doesn't fit. But the actual scene itself is kind of okay. Someone pointed out that the android is actually kind of creepy, which he kind of is because he's not quite human and he's not Data, and that was part of the problem, was that they would be basically creating a bunch of copies and clones and they wouldn't be Data. That Data was unique, that his programming was sort of like a fluke. Law kind of had it, but he was evil, so he didn't really work. But he kind of did, and they keep ignoring Law. I'm like, what did they do? Did he get destroyed at some point? And they just forgotten to mention that, where did Law go? But it's very difficult to believe that one android could just come in and just take down the whole defense grid, and that he would kill himself at the end when he could just shut himself down. It just seemed a bit overdramatic. Now, the next scene when we get with Picard and his workers. Now, I really like the Irish Romulan. The idea that the Romulans have assimilated to the point of taking on accents and such in the... I'm not sure how many years have happened since Nemesis, since the actual supernova. But it's not a long time, and the idea that first generation would assimilate on that level doesn't really go with how things normally happen. But then again, they could just be overcompensating because they are perfectionists, and So we see them, just Picard and the female Romulan. They go to Dash's apartment to try and work out what happened, and they get some sort of reading and are able to see some sort of representation of her and her boyfriend before the attack, but then after that it stops because the whole apartment has been scrubbed by someone, and she has put it down to what were they called, the Vash or something. They're basically behind or bigger than the Tau Shiar, which was like the secret police. So, but then she brings in this idea that they had some problem with AIs and that Romulans in general don't use AI. And I do seem to recall the Romulans being a bit low-tech, at least the civilians. But this does seem a bit just created to serve the story. But it doesn't necessarily break canon, it just seems a bit odd. So she explains all of that. So there's a lot of history, a lot of just talk. I remember thinking this scene is going on, there's a lot of talk, how far are we into the time of the episode at the moment. Now they do sort of work out that the messages from the twin were coming from off Earth. So they're still trying to work out. They haven't found out where she is yet. Now, Picard gets a visit from his doctor, and the doctor establishes that he is, that rheumatic syndrome is setting in, and that it will be a bad death, basically, and he'll be better off dying in battle. And there is some rumour that Picard does die during this mission, and that the crew goes on and they name the ship Picard, and the idea of the little what would you call it? It's not a starship. It's more of a the crappy little ship Picard going on adventures with this ragtag group of renegades. It's just two renegades, and I mean, I'm sure it'd be a lot better for the series to not have Picard financially, because Patrick Stewart costs so much, but I don't see it working without him, so that's sort of alarming. They seem to be setting that up. Now he goes to Starfleet, which is where we see the Discovery Enterprise, and they establish that this is the Discovery universe. Now he goes in to see the Commander-in-Chief, and she's sort of like, what the F are you doing here? And when Picard was sort of saying, this is what I need, it did seem very entitled. Like, well, I just disappeared for 20 years. I've dissed the Federation. I've disowned the Federation. But now I need you. Can I have a ship and a small crew? And I'll take a reduction in rank if it helps. And she drops the second F-bomb in Star Trek, or I think the third F-bomb in Star Trek. One episode had a scene with, I think, 2 F-bombs. And she basically says, the fucking hubris that you have to come in here and just demand all of this after basically disowning the Federation. And she sort of calls him a traitor. Basically, you abandoned us for the Romulans, and now you want our help. So she basically tells him no, and he stands up and says, I stood up for the Federation, what the Federation should stand for. And he literally stands up, and she basically stands up to, like, don't you yell at me, don't you talk over me, don't you stand above me, which does seem very insecure for a woman. Like, how I have to react to this man, because, like, it does seem a little bit, there's some sexism at play here. I don't think Picard is being at all sexist, but she seems to be reacting to him just as a man wanting authority, or a man who has had authority in the past that she's threatened by on some level. It kind of works kind of very uncomfortable with the swearing, that, like, you wouldn't really swear at someone else in your ranks like that and speak like that to another person, even if you thought they had an incredible amount of hubris to come in and ask for favours. But she's kind of a little racist, so she's a little sexist as well, so she reacts on, and those people are insecure, and they always react on those levels. So she turns around and tells him that basically he says she's in peril. She says there's no peril. Basically, just you and your pitiable delusions of a once great man, desperate to matter. Basically, it's no longer your house. Go back home. Basically, she totally disses him, and he leaves with a no, and quite offended as he should be, because for all he has done for the Federation, he should be treated with more respect. He should be taken seriously. But because of racism and the idea that he's a Romulan sympathizer and the Romulans are less than human, they're an enemy, along with the synths that have been, well, they're not human, but dehumanized and turned into a villain, a boogeyman. That's the level some of the people in Starfleet are operating at, and that's what we see here. And it's pretty ugly. So he basically puts on his badge, his wonderful Voyager era, late next gen era badge, and calls Raffi, his former crew member. And they do make the point, which I'm glad, that why doesn't he call Riker and Geordi and Worf and all that? Because he knows they would follow him into battle to their death out of loyalty, and he doesn't want that, because he hasn't recovered from Data doing that. So he calls her, goes to her, and we know he gets her involved again. But and this is the road he's going on now. And the other side of the story, which is not as interesting, is we see the twin, and she's sleeping with the Romulan, who is his sister, is disguised as a human in Starfleet, Lieutenant, what was it, Roxy or something? Some really weird name, which I wrote down and now I've lost. Oops. So the Admiral does, the Commander-in-Chief does contact a Commodore who could be a flat-headed Romulan, but also could be a Vulcan. I'm not clear, I haven't worked it out. It's probably defined, but she could be portraying one when she's really the other. She's behind it all. She killed Daz. She was hunting them down. She's hunting down the twin. They're looking for a nest of other synths who apparently have escaped, and they're hunting them because apparently they've got some prejudice against them, which seems to be coming out of nowhere for the Romulans. But then again, the Romulans are pretty secretive. They could have been hiding something like this and we probably wouldn't have known. There's even a joke that the Irish Romulan is working for Picard makes, which is kind of funny. That's what we wanted you to believe. Because he's talking about his knowledge of Romulan technology and so forth and culture and that. And, she's like, yeah, that's what we wanted you to believe. So we go to the Borg cube, and the Romulans are basically taking it apart, using it for research, and the remaining Borg that were abandoned once the cube was disconnected from the collective are being unborged, basically, and unassimilated. And there's some sort of talk about dehumanizing them and that they should be treated differently, and that's going to play in later. But we basically it's set up that the lieutenant is his sister. She's hiding, and it's a conspiracy, but it's a conspiracy that we knew about, and it's not very interesting. It's not really a big surprise in any way. And the only good thing about it is, if by season 3 of Discovery the Federation has collapsed, at least we know it's because of the Romulan infiltration and them stoking fear and insecurity and all that, like back in the Enterprise days with the Mars separatists and stuff. At least we know that's what it is. It's not that that Federation and humanity just couldn't evolve and didn't have it in them to get past the stuff we're dealing with today. They were basically sabotaged by the Romulans. So it does make the idea of that future that they're going to slide Star Trek into with Discovery a little bit more. It's still not tolerable or palatable, but at least it's a little bit less unbelievable. So that's basically the episode. That's what happens. Spoilers. It wasn't that bad to watch once you get past the issues with it being a Discovery universe and where they're going with the overall direction of the Federation, future of the Federation. It could unfold in a way that's not totally Discovery Season 1. It's already kind of better than Discovery Season 2. The actual production level of the writing and that is not as bad. It is higher level. And if they had tried to do a real next-gen continuation, they could have done a better job, I think. They could have done a decent job. I just wish they had gone that way. But but like I said, in the other thing, the good thing about this being Discovery Universe is it doesn't affect the other Star Trek canon universe. So you don't have to care as much. So I'm not as bothered as much by the things that don't work. But I've already talked much longer than I wanted to. I wanted to do a short video on this because the other one was long. But at least I talked about a lot of the stuff that I sort of missed because I was too busy talking about the bigger problems. But that's the problem with Picard. I'm going to go. Thanks for watching this long. If you have, feel free to share, comment, like, and comments. Anything you know that I've gotten wrong or that I don't know that you know that I don't know, please feel free to let me know. Thanks, bye.